Hello, everybody. Let's do it. It's happening. It's happening. It's Monday. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining the most censored comedian in America. Thanks for being here. It is quite a pleasure to chat with you. The U.S. has found someone new that we would like to coup. That because for a while there it was touch and go. We were like, oh, there's no one left. Coup. Whose country are we gonna help destroy or put in people that we because we like doing it, and sometimes we just run out of places. But now Niger has popped up, and we love cooing and infiltrating and destroying and upending countries so much that we're talking about invading Niger, even though we're already there. We already have a military base in Niger, and yet a massive one. And yet at the same time, we're like, but I think we need to invade. I think it's time for us to go in there. And because then the invading U.S. military can meet up with the military that's already there, and they can like high five and be like, hey, we're doing it. But yes, there is talk of the U.S. and France trying to invade, disrupt, destroy Niger. Now, of course, we don't call it that, right? We call it undoing their very bad coup that has happened. This is a bad coup. So I'm about to bring you some of the New York Times propaganda on this, some of the reality behind it that you aren't getting from the New York Times. There's a lot of important information about Niger and some of the other African countries and what is exactly is going on there. A little later in the hour, I'm going to get into something that's a broad topic that RFK Jr. has gotten very wrong, and it's almost it's almost comical to watch. But so we'll get into that. What else? What happened with Imran Khan in Pakistan? Elon Musk says he's going to fund your legal bills if you've ever had some harm done to your job via Twitter. Anyway, I'm going to get into all those stories. Let's do it. Let's get started. So a lot of this information is coming from geopoliticaleconomy.com. Ben Norton over there does great work. This has been reprinted at Popular Resistance. They also do amazing work. U.S. France threaten intervention in the resource-rich Niger. The U.S. and France have threatened foreign intervention to reinstall a pro-Western regime in Niger. I mean, we've hardly even waited for the coup to get to like cool off a little. We don't even wait. We're like, it's still piping hot, and we're like, we gotta fuck up the fuck up because they screwed it up. We got to get in there and unscrew it up. And by unscrew it up, we mean put in Western aligned entities to allow us to continue to extract and really just hollow out any remaining resources in Niger. As the article says, Niger is a major producer of gold and uranium, the latter of which is needed for the European nuclear energy systems. The country has significant oil reserves to which foreign corporations have wanted access. It also hosts large U.S. drone bases. So now we see what the interest is in Niger. Raise your hand if you thought the reason the U.S. was interested in Niger was because we want to see them be happy and fruitful, and we want to see them have democracy and justice, and that's why we even care about Niger. It's kind of amazing to watch the propaganda outlets like New York Times and stuff, because they might not quite put it in those terms, but it's pretty close to being like, we just want for democracy things. We like, so much good democracy we need to help with. That's what we do. We help with democracy, which of course is laughable. I mean, it really is like the New York Times is writing for children, like for 6-year-olds. Like, is there anyone in fucking the United States who thinks still still that the reason the U.S. gets involved in other countries is to help with democracy. It's just so laughable that who are these people? And I'm still reading the New York Times and going, oh, this must be the truth. Thank goodness I didn't get the disinformation from the online platforms. These Western threats follow coups. The Western threats of basically re-coupping. It's coups stacked on coups. There's so many coups. It's like someone wearing 4 hats. You're like, what kind of hat are you wearing? Well, it's complicated. We're trying to undo a coup, redo a coup, double coup. These Western threats follow coups led by nationalist anti-colonial military officers in neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali, whose governments have warned that intervention would be considered an act of war and could thus set off a regional conflict. So the reason the U.S. and France have not already flown in and done their dirtiest in Niger is basically these threats from Burkina Faso and Mali, which have basically said they will step in if the U.S. and France go in. Almost all of West Africa was colonized by France, to give you a little background, which committed brutal atrocities in the region. And that's the other thing is like with the U.S. and France saying, we need to go help them with their democracy. Even if that were true, let's say that were true, and let's say that France was just a true caring actor in this whole drama, and the U.S. just cared about the people struggling and all those things, and the U.S. was completely a whole different place that just had a history of actually caring, except you go back 50 or 100 or 200 years, and these are the countries that raped and pillaged and destroyed these African countries. So to look to France and the U.S., it'd be like looking to your abuser and being like, can they come help a little, take care of me? I mean, like there is any other countries in the world would have more legitimacy in saying they want to help African countries than like France, the U.S., Britain, Belgium. You know, there are a few countries that truly and utterly raped and pillaged Africa, and those countries should be banned from getting involved with Africa no matter what happens, because we know where they stand. We know what their history is. We know what their resume says. I mean, imagine looking at the U.S. resume and being like, well, now it's time for them to help us here in Africa. You've got a list of just like 900 of varying types of destruction, cooing, and pillaging and extraction and stealing and slave trade. And you go, well, but down here underneath those 900, let's add a line of we're here to help. We'll give you peanut butter. Still today, France maintains neocolonial policies, effectively controlling West African economies by forcing them to use the CFA franc as their national currency. So I've talked a lot about currency on this show and about how important the petrodollar is to the power and force, the military force of the U.S. and the empire. And so similarly, although not quite on our scale, but similarly, the CFA franc being used in these countries is a form of imperialism by France so that they can control them, etc. Senegalese development economist Ndongo Samba Sylla described the CFA franc as a colonial currency born of France's need to foster economic integration among the colonies under its administration and thus control their resources, economic structures, and political systems. You control a country's currency, you control a lot of shit. You control a lot of what that country can do, especially what they cannot do, the changes they can't make, because you control their economic system. Paris dictates the monetary policies and even holds much of the foreign exchange reserves of numerous West African nations, including Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Isn't it amazing this still goes on? That still to this day, France is controlling these countries via their currency. The CFA franc is a neocolonial device that continues to destroy any prospect of economic development in other nations. And that there is a map of former French colonies across Africa. Something you should know, in case you hadn't already heard this, is if you wonder, where did Africa get their countries? How did they decide on those lines? Who put those lines there? Like, what? Because it's always interesting with nation states. It's like, who came up with these things? Like, who decided this is what this country is? This is this country, and if you step over this line, then fuck you. Like, who? Because it wasn't. Most of them was not recently. There's not a lot of countries that recently, like, this is the line. And so when was that? And if you look up the history of Africa, it's incredibly fascinating because it was done by a room full of incredibly rich white men in 1855. Is that right? Did I get the year right? 1855 Berlin. I mean, it went over several years, so sometimes I get the year incorrect. But Berlin Conference, where these various nations, Belgium, Britain, the U.S. was there, but the U.S. was not powerful enough at that time, 1855, to get their own country. You know, they were off to the sides being like, we like to have some input. But, you know, Belgium, Britain, Germany, Dutch. I realized that I just switched from nations to nationalities, but Netherlands. They were the ones deciding, and they literally put a map of Africa. And there was one emperor, maybe it was Tunisia, who said he wanted to be, and, you know, could I at least be there? This is happening in Berlin. So you're in a white country with all white rich men sitting around staring at a map of Africa and going, okay, fellas, let's civilize this process. Let's draw some lines and we'll divvy up Africa. So there's none of this warring stuff. We need to agree on who gets to steal what. Okay? And then there was one guy who wrote, that's what you did back then, and said, you know, I'm the emperor of, I think it was Tunisia. Can I'd like to be involved in if there's going to be a divvying up of the, you know, deciding the lines of countries and areas of Africa. And they said, absolutely not. We will not have an African in the room as we slice up Africa. Are you out of your mind? What would we, do you know how awkward that would make us feel? Have you thought about us at all? How awkward would we feel if there was an actual African in the room as we sliced up Africa? Jesus, the insensitivity of that suggestion. Ugh, we would like to do this on our own so we don't have to look you in the eye. So they divvied it up, and of course, this has had incredibly massive lasting impacts, not just of the pillaging of Africa by white and Western nations, but also even just between Africans. Like, you had tribes that kind of hated each other being lumped into the same nation. You had tribes and families that, of course, were aligned and you know, loved each other, cared about each other, with all of a sudden they got a national border sliced between their tribe. And of course, many of these people at the time had no idea that a border had been placed between them and their family. And they don't find out till years later, 20, 40 years later. Oh, you're in a different nation and they're over there and you can't go there. What? Totally fucking insane. Anyway, that being said, let's move on. It's good to know these history things, right? The United States has one of its largest and most important drone bases in Niger, the Air Base 201, which costs $110 million to build and an additional $20 to $30 million per year to maintain, in one of the poorest countries on Earth. Niger is geostrategically important for the Pentagon's Africa strategy, which, if we were truly caring, non-psychopathic, sensitive adults, we would go, why does the U.S. have an Africa strategy? Why is the U.S. in Africa at all? Why is the U.S. have military bases littered across Africa? Why is that? Is it because we're there to help? Is it because we're fucking Roy Roger in it? Not Roy Roger. Mr. Roger in it up. Just, hey, neighbor, I'm here to help. Is that why you think? No, we're more Roy Rogering it up, more cowboy shit. Washington uses its drone bases in Niger in the heart of Sahel to try to exercise military dominance in North and West Africa in coordination with the forces that U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, has deployed across the continent. The country is a major producer of gold, but more than 40% of Nigerians live in extreme poverty. So as this gold gets dug up out of the ground, gets mined, gets all the work and the effort put into that, it is then shipped the fuck out of Niger, and the people there remain in extreme poverty. That's what extraction looks like. That's what it looks like when you rob an entire people of the resources that are in their country. Niger is also one of the world's largest producers of uranium. This radioactive material is crucial for nuclear energy in Europe, especially in France, where roughly 1/3 of electricity comes from nuclear power. Less known is that Niger also has sizable oil reserves. So we're also there for the oil. In 2013, 2014, France launched a military intervention in Mali, a neighbor of Niger. And that's the other thing you'll find, that if you look into the history of these places, the U.S. and France and other Western entities have been upending them and creating coups and bringing down sometimes democratically elected, sometimes not, leaders for generations. So this is not new. It's not like yesterday France was like, I think we need to get involved in Mali. Get involved in doing Mali. No, I think we need to get involved in Burkina Faso. No, we and they have been involved in these countries for generations. In a 2011 regime change war, NATO, led by the United States with the support of France, other European nations, and Canada, destroyed the African state of Libya, killing the North African nation's longtime revolutionary leader, Muammar Gaddafi. So, of course, you know that one. That one is probably the best known of the U.S. and NATO allies going in, totally just decimating a country, making sure their leader is stabbed to death in the streets, and then just leaving the place in ruins. Because a broken state, a failed state, or a warring state is often very useful to the U.S. war machine. We can go into Libya and steal what we need, but more importantly, we don't have to worry about a powerful figure like Gaddafi changing things up, as he was talking about. He was talking about creating an African currency, a gold African currency that would be used by African nations, which would undermine the petrodollar throughout the entire continent. That was one of his big pushes. And of course, that we just leave and we go, oh, isn't that crazy what happens in Libya? We treated it like we had walked into a antique store, pushed over shelves, and the whole place just like domino effects. Everything crashes to the floor. $1 million antiques all in shards. And then we went away whistling, just like, something happened back there. I don't know. Did you guys hear that? There was something in Libya. There was something. I heard a big loud crash. Not sure what happened there. But yeah, so that's kind of the reality of what's going on in Niger. So what in terms of some of the details of what just happened the other day is that there was a military takeover of Niger. They kicked out or brought down the U.S.-backed, French-backed leader who was working very hard to do everything the U.S. and France wanted from him. And this doesn't mean that like everything's peaches and cream. We don't know a lot about these military leaders. I don't know that they're the best people on earth. But at the same time, the U.S. has no leg to stand on in terms of caring about these countries or wanting the best for them. So the idea that the U.S. should have any say in African countries is just insanity. Anti-colonial nationalists rise to power in West Africa. Some of the nationalist military leaders who have taken power in West Africa are invoking the historical legacy of anti-colonial movements. In Niger's neighbor, Burkina Faso, I don't know why I always trip on that. Burkina Faso. I think it's because I want to say Burkino. I don't know. Burkina Faso. The new president, Ibrahim Traore, has vowed to fight imperialism, quoting Che Guevara, and allying with the leftist governments in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. France is plotting military intervention in Niger pretty publicly. Paris is looking for, quote, ways and means to intervene militarily in Niger, the authorities said, stating that French officials met with the chief of staff of Niger's National Guard to, quote, obtain the necessary political and military authorization, the Guardian reported. So this is, however, foreign intervention may be easier said than done, however, because Niger's neighbors have come to its defense. It is amazing how public they make these things now. Like there is like France and the US are barely trying to hide the fact that they plan to go in and re-coup Niger in order to put in another Western backed puppet. It really is not very secretive. Now, there is a bit of propaganda to try and make it sound like something we just have to do if we care about the people of Africa. Here is the New York Times propaganda piece on it. Not another coup as usual. You know why it's not another coup as usual? Because this one's not U.S. backed. That's why it's not another coup as usual. So this coup took a different course. It says the United States and France threatened to cut ties with Niger, endangering hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. So the hundreds of millions of dollars in aid always comes with strings attached, such as put in a leader that will do what we want. That's the string. And so when New York Times focuses in the second paragraph of this article, focuses on, well, Niger might lose their aid. That's like saying, that store might lose their mafia protection. If they tell the mafia to leave, who's going to protect them? So the New York Times is focusing on this focusing on that aspect of it, because it's like, well, because it makes it seem like the U.S. does good. We're here to help. We give aid to Niger. Why? Well, we know why. But of course, the New York Times doesn't highlight that stuff. The neighboring countries of Mali and Burkina Faso have leaped to the junta's defense. Oh, that's the other thing is, so yes, this was a military coup in Niger, kicking out the seemingly democratically elected president. I don't know how official the elections were, but in a lot of these countries, you can have democracy, and you can have a democracy that, especially if it's kind of new, is really easily manipulated by the U.S. with our fountains of money. So, you could have a democratic election that is still a U.S. kind of created election. But anyway, so yes, it's a military coup, but the New York Times makes sure it's a military junta. They love using that term only when it's a country that we don't like what's going on. When it's a country that the U.S. government doesn't like what's going on, it's a junta. Why do they call it that? Because it sounds scary, right? It sounds like another language. It's a junta. Who knows what goes on with a junta? It just sounds terrifying. Whereas, how many countries are run by like a military leader, and yet the U.S., if the military that agrees with the U.S. and does our bidding, then we don't use that term. It's just, the military leadership of the country. How about the U.S.? We're pretty much run by our military. We've even had, with Eisenhower, we even had a general as president, but we're run by our military. Are we a junta? Like, the Pentagon does what it wants. I mean, several times under Donald Trump, even though I am no Donald Trump fan, but several times under Donald Trump, he said he was going to do something that did not align with the Pentagon. He was going to pull all the troops out of Afghanistan without much warning. He was going to pull troops out of Syria. And each time our junta said, no, Nope, that's not happening. And sure enough, it did not happen. So it looks like the military is pulling the strings. So that would, if the military is pulling the strings, then the U.S. has a junta in terms of leadership. The neighboring countries of Mali and Burkina Faso have leaped to the junta's defense. Oh, yeah, I read that. And also that, like another way to phrase that would be the neighboring countries have said they will defend the current government of Niger. That would be one way to phrase it also. But the New York Times can't do that. They can't just say, oh, these countries have said they would support the new government. Because that sounds rational, right? Military cooperation is now suspended. That's right. Military cooperation. There's another one. So they mean U.S. military involvement in Niger is now suspended. So before this coup, the U.S. had a leader in there that said, oh, yeah, just you can have your military, whatever, you can do whatever you want with it. And we were like, yeah. And so that's called military cooperation. That's not called the U.S. raping and pillaging your country via our military. That's completely different. That's, it's completely different. Military cooperation is now suspended. Oh, my God. Cooperation suspended as the United States and France exert pressure on the junta to restore democracy. What do you think U.S. pressure looks like? It's U.S. pressure. It's like it's like mafia pressure. It's like, well, he exerted a little pressure on it. Well, what exactly kind of pressure? Oh, we threatened to break their knees. They said they were going to bomb them. They said they were going to take all the aid money that they're getting. They said okay, that kind of pressure. Well, that's some serious pressure. But boys, pressure sounds nicer as a euphemism, doesn't it? Than just say the U.S. said it would break the government's knees if need be. And all of this is to say this is why we need a goddamn literal rock, like a rock that I found outside, as president of the United States, because it wouldn't be doing any of this. Wouldn't be threatening to invade Niger. It would not be aligning with invasion forces. The yardrock2024.com. Okay. I'm just saying, you wouldn't have all of this push for World War III if you had a literal rock as president. Okay. It would undo the junta. Totally. It would just like this is, I mean this literally. If you had an actual just fucking rock, just a stone sitting on the Oval Office desk that couldn't sign shit, this world would be far better off. Couldn't push any red buttons. Couldn't send any goddamn forces into sovereign nations. You would just have a way better world, better country than any of this. Let's see. Here's a little more from our favorite propaganda outlet real quick before I wrap up this topic. Democratically elected leaders are falling like bowling pins. Yeah. You notice the New York Times does not say leaders are falling like bowling pins when the U.S. is just cooing a bunch of countries. That's to make you scared. Oh, wait, democracy is falling? Since 2023 of Niger's neighbors, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea have experienced 5 coups. An avowed modernizer, there's another euphemism, a modernizer. What does a modernizer mean? Oh, you mean aligned with U.S. Imperialism. Basically, if you sign off on the U.S. doing whatever the fuck it wants in your country, extracting, yeah, sure, it might build you some things to keep you happy. Okay, we built a bridge while we steal all of your oil or uranium or gold. That's called modernizing. So if you agree with U.S. imperialism, you're a modernizer. Wow, that sounds really nice. Modern is a good thing, right? Modern's wonderful. If you agree with U.S. imperialism, that's a modernizer. If you disagree with U.S. imperialism and the U.S. just gutting of your country, then that is going backwards, all right? That is ancient times right there, my friend. An avowed modernizer, Mr. Bazoum, that's the previous president that has been couped out of power now, Promoted girls' education. Oh, we've heard this one used before, right? In Afghanistan and other places. The U.S. The U.S. will allow all kinds of destruction to a country, and then we'll sugarcoat it or we'll paint it over with a rainbow flag by saying there was girls' education. Is there not girls' education in other places as well? No, only in the countries that you have your puppet in power. Furthermore, the U.S. will be like bombing nations, killing Lord knows how many women and children. I mean, just the war on terror over the past 20 years is 6 million people. How many of those are women and children? Oh, like a lot of them, like a lot of them. So does that harm women's education when you blow up said women? When you explode them with drone bombs, does that harm their education schedule? Do they graduate later when you've blown them up, or no? That's those two completely separate things. He also sought to reduce Niger's birth rate, the highest in the world, and oversaw an impressive economic revival. That means that the U.S. sent him billions to do their bidding and allow our drone bases there and allow oil to and allow France to walk away with all their gold while 40% of the country is in severe poverty. So about 1,100 American troops and 1,500 French troops are based in Niger, as well as several drone bases. The alliance with the West helped Mr. Bazoum make Niger safer. That's what we do, folks. We make places safer, even as they're stuck in immense poverty and we are stealing their gold and uranium and oil. They're safe. They're safe. That's kind of like the argument. Of slaves on the plantations were really well taken care of. They were safe. They didn't have to worry about being attacked or robbed. They had a place to sleep that was safe. But once they leave that plantation, who knows what'll happen out there? That's the very similar insane argument of like if you make someone who is either your slave or is yoked to you. They've got your chains around their neck, but they're safe, but they're kept safe, right? Very exciting. So, all right, moving on from that topic, I'm about to get to, well, actually a very, very similar topic. I want to talk about the number of U.S. launched military interventions. We're going to do that first. Then we're going to get to what topic RFK Jr. has been getting very, 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 very wrong. But all right, so let's get to this one real quick. This is an easy segue, obviously. So this is the U.S. saying they want to come, they want to help Africa, right? They want to help Niger have democracy. The U.S. has launched 251 military interventions since 1991. Just since 1991. 250. 469 since 1798. And let's be honest, part of the reason that we didn't have as many invasions back in the 1800s of other countries is because it was tough to get there. You had to get on a boat. It's like back then you hear something happen in Niger and you're like, oh Jesus, what is that, like a 3-month trip? Yes, I know we got to go and we have to de-coup them or re-coup them or put in our puppets. I know, but I just don't want to get on that ship for 3.5 months. It's a long time to go. No one's even invented a television yet. I'm gonna play cards for 3 months. Fuck. God damn it. If someone could just get on the TV situation. 250. And here's a map. I forgot. This is the ones we've admitted. I forgot to say this. Let me start this over. The U.S. has admitted to 251 military interventions since 1991 and 469 since 1798. Admitted. These are the ones we said we did do. This is not even counting the ones we fucking deny. Because this map, the source is the Congressional Research Service. Everything in red, we have had military interventions in. And then a lot of the others that we haven't, it's because they were already fully aligned with us and we didn't have to worry about invading them. So you look at like Canada's not in red because they just always do our bidding. You have Australia's not in red because they just always do whatever the fuck we tell them to. So some of these, it's not like we couldn't. It's just we didn't need to. I think it must be there's people like John Bolton and Kissinger and shit and that and Anthony Blinken that are probably looking at this map and going, I wish that we had a little more red here and there, but the problem is we haven't needed to. Like if they could just say something mean to us so we can have a reason to go in there, because I really would like to turn Australia red on this map. The United States has launched at least 251 military interventions between 1991 and 2022. This is according to a report by the Congressional Research Service. So the U.S. government's admitted to this. Did I mention that? A U.S. government institution that compiles information on behalf of Congress. The report documented another 218 U.S. military interventions from 1798 to 1990. That makes for a grand total of 469 since 1798, acknowledged by Congress. Did I mention we've admitted to this? This is not. I mean, I always find it amazing when it's shit we've admitted to. Like this, the New York Times with all their propaganda couldn't even deny that we've done this. Couldn't deny it. This data was published on March 8th, 2022 by the Congressional Research Service. The list of countries targeted by the U.S. military includes the vast majority of nations on Earth, including almost every single country in Latin America and the Caribbean and most of the African continent. From the beginning of 1991 to the beginning of 2004, the U.S. military launched 100 interventions, according to the Congressional Research Service. That number grew to 200 between 91 and 2018. And here's the punchline. I'm about to give you the punchline to this whole insane number of U.S. interventions. And even interventions is a light term because some of these are assassinations. Some of these are full-on destruction of countries or democratically elected leaders. Intervention, yes, it includes a lot of things. So it could also include just sending a few, military personnel over to help with a coup or something like that. But it also includes when we put bullets through people's fucking heads. So it's a nice term. But here's the punchline. Keep that number in your head. 250 since 1991, 469 since 1798, which is way more than the number of countries out there. Keep those numbers in your head and then read this quote from our lovely Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, from our squirrel-eyed Secretary of State. He tweeted out, or the State Department tweeted out, governments that violate human rights are almost always the same ones that flout other key parts of that order, such as invading, coercing, and threatening other countries, or breaking trade rules. The U.S. will continue to take a stand for human rights for all. Go, Tony! Flout other key parts of the international order, such as invading, coercing, or threatening other countries. And then you look at that map that shows nearly the whole world in red because we have invaded nearly every country in the world. And the ones we haven't invaded, at some point, it's because they've always just aligned with us and we never needed to. This is insanity. Pure, utter insanity. This is also why when it was asked of the world, nations around the world, people around the world, what is the country that most threatens peace? Number one on that list was the United States. And this map is why. Just it's true psychopathological fucking murderous insanity. And that's why you need a literal rock sitting on that Oval Office desk, because you need a non-psychopath. And that rock is not going to do anything in terms of just invading and destroying other countries. It will let other countries do their own thing. Okay, before I'm going to run out of time here, but let's go over to, and here's the thing. And I've said this a few times, I am a supporter of certain things that RFK Jr. has highlighted. I've shown videos of him highlighting the harms of big ag, the harms of big pharma. There are certain things, and the corruption of corporations over our state. So of those certain things, I will highlight them. However, he also is undermining his entire campaign, by spouting this garbage about Israel and Palestine. And I thought I'd have, if I'm going to bring you the good stuff, I got to bring you the bad stuff. So I'm going to play a clip of Max and Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate just tearing apart. And it's just honestly one clip of like an hour and a half of them tearing apart his interview. And he's like, they're literal lies. They're literal. You couldn't be an even moderately intelligent person. And I'm not saying he's not. I'm saying I think he knows what he's doing. You couldn't be an even moderately intelligent person and spout this garbage. All right. So because we're coming up on 3:45 Eastern, I'm going to go to rumble.com/Lee Camp for the rest of this. I will grab the link for you. It's completely free to watch. Rumble.com. Oh, and before I do that, actually, I should tell you that I have decided, because I had such a good time doing the Green Party fundraiser, that they asked me to perform some stand-up comedy. I hadn't done Zoom comedy really at all. And so I did that, and I was like, well, this is actually kind of fun. So I'm having my first ever global Zoom. I like throwing global in there. I guess everything online is global. Like this is global right now. But my first ever global Zoom stand-up comedy show, all new material, never before seen anywhere. Also my first ever show like this, and it's a whopping $5 to attend. So I hope you will consider doing that. Let's see if I can remember that URL. Probably not, actually. Let me give you a link to it. There's going to be a limited number of tickets. So, limited number of tickets. So grab it if you can, September 2nd and Saturday night. Oh my God. Why am I having trouble finding this? This is bullshit. This fucking stupid goddamn shit. Fuck shit. Goddamn. All right. I got it. Oh, and I already got a special guest lined up to open the show who you're going to love. It's someone you know, and you're going to be goddamn thrilled. So it should be a pretty magical evening. Anyway, I just put the link in the chat there, but I'll put it up on my website soon. It's just not there yet. Sorry about that. Okay. Now that I've completely screwed up all this, completely delayed everything, rumble.com/Lee Camp. Let's keep moving there. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you over there. Completely free to keep watching. Also on Locals, obviously. It's free to keep watching there. I'm going to chat with you guys at Locals at the